Welcome to the Voices of a Black Man. My name is CK James, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Ed Clark. The Voices of a Black Man is a platform for Black men to be seen and heard, a place for viewers to listen to their story through their lens. With everything going on into society, there is a narrative being told, the narrative of a Black man. But one thing was missing. That one thing, the Black man. So we started this project series to interview 30 plus Black men to tell their stories through their lenses. In a hope that you would listen, you can check yourself for biases that you may not even know you have, or find out some information that you never knew before, to be able to then make different actions in your life, which then impacts others' lives. So thank you for viewing today. And we're talking to Ed Clark. I'm super excited to have him today. And I hope that you preview the series. Feel free to go to www.thevoicesofablackman.com to learn more about our speakers and to learn more about their stories through their lens. But today we have Ed Clark. Ed, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. How are you today?
I am good. Thank you very much.
Good. So we're just going to dive right on into this.
Okay.
And just tell us about young Ed. Who is young Ed? Where is he from? How did he grow up?
Well, it's convoluted, but my dad was in the military for a while, starting in the late 50s up to the end of the 60s. But he was a pharmacist, and he had come back stateside when I was born in 1965 in Irwin, North Carolina. I'm not sure why I wasn't born on base at Fort Bragg, but Irwin's not too far away. My mom is from that area in Harnett County, so I was born at Good Hope Hospital in Irwin, North Carolina, on April 7, 1965. And my dad was still in the Army at the time and just getting ready to get out. And soon after that, we were back in DC, which is where he's from. He worked at Walter Reed Army Hospital and also at DC General Hospital as a pharmacist, and later with CVS as a pharmacist.
Oh, wow. So who were some of the influential people in your life as you were growing up?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, my family is pretty unique. My dad, most of his family were college educated. Like I said, he was a pharmacist. So on his side of the family, there was doctors and lawyers and pharmacists and that kind of thing. But my mom's family, they were sharecroppers. They grew up in Harnett County, basically working on farm, doing farm labor. And I tell you, the most influential people in my life actually turned out to be the folks who were the farmers. My uncle Saul and Uncle Johnson and all those people who worked really hard, and I saw them working extremely hard. And I think I acquired a work ethic from them. So they were the ones who were most influential. But on my father's side, to think about my dad, he was sort of like me. He's a polyglot. He was interested in every single thing. We had tons of books. We had tons of records. We had a movie camera. We made film. We took pictures. We had a dark room in the house. It was just a unique experience. So my dad always was introducing me to people, because as the pharmacist, people would come into pharmacy. I would sit on the stool there, and it was back in the day when they had the lunch counter. And he worked on Wisconsin Avenue in DC, right near where, they call it Foggy Bottom. And a lot of the diplomats would come in there. So I was introduced to people from India and Australia and England and everywhere else. And our neighborhood was like that too. My friends were from everywhere. And then when I would come to North Carolina, then I would get that experience of living in the country. And I think both of those informed me, because I saw strong Black men in both places. Either they were, working some job like, the doctors and lawyers that I knew from around my dad, but also the farmers who, worked their tails off to support their family, who were down in Harnett County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When did you realize that you weren't just a young man, but a Black man? And what did that mean to you?
Yeah, that was pretty early. I mean, I think my first real memory that I have is of a fire. And it was the night Martin Luther King was assassinated. We were still living in the city, and everything was on fire. And I just remember getting bundled into the car. And then the next morning we were in North Carolina. My dad sent us back down to North Carolina because the city was just on fire. And just the conversations I was hearing from the adults, and it became very clear that people didn't like Black folks. And then a little while later, I guess I was about 5 years old, I remember going into a store in Harnett County, and I wanted to get some cookies out of the jar. And I'm an old guy, so back in the old days, the cookies used to sit in a jar. The penny cookies, you used to put them on your finger. And at the pharmacy, though, where my dad worked, I would just go and get the tongs and get my own cookies. And we had just pulled into North Carolina, into town. I go into the store and I immediately go to get the cookies because that gave me 10 cents to go in the store. And I went to open it and someone slapped my hand and said, "Nigger, don't ever do that again." And luckily my uncle was in the store. One of my older uncles was in the store. He was like, hey, he doesn't understand. But I understood that it was not like being at the pharmacy where my dad worked. This was a whole different thing. And it became clear. And of course, they had to have the talk with me about when you're in North Carolina, not to do this, that, or the other, that you could only do this in our neighborhood, that you can't do it there. And it was clear to me that, I was different, even though with my friends, I was in and out of their houses, and I ate more Indian food, I think, as a kid. That's why I can take a lot of hot pepper now. But my very best friends as kids were from everywhere. It was like the Little Rascals kind of childhood,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do you attribute to growing up with all types of ethnicities and being able to really, engage in those ethnicities to now, to, from then to now and growing up?
Yeah, no, it makes a tremendous difference in my life. I've worked with people from everywhere. We'll delve into this, I'm sure, later, but one of my professions is in IT. And a lot of times I'm talking to people from all over the world. And so a lot of times people have trouble with Indian accents. It's natural to me when I hear it. So I can detect those pretty good. So, but the thing is, I'll go anywhere too. So I've been to Europe, of course. I've been to Asia. I've been to South America, all over the Caribbean and stuff. And I could meet people and not meet a stranger. I will also try absolutely any food there is. So I eat everything and I cook everything. So I don't have a boring, life as far as that's concerned when it comes to interacting with other people. It's easy for me to interact with other people because of how I grew up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So growing up, now you graduated in Prince George County from high school?
Well, no, I actually ended up, so my dad, he got sick and he decided to retire early. And I came to North Carolina for high school. And I went to Harnett Central High School in Angier, graduated from there and went to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. But at Harnett Central, it wasn't a big shock or whatever because I came every summer, but it was different in that some things that I expected, like at the schools that I had gone to previously, we had a film club and we had a radio station and I participate in all those things. And I get to Harnett Central and they don't have any of that. So it was a little bit different there. There were still racial tensions. I mean, I started high school in 1979. And Harnett County schools had not long before integrated. When I went to the University of North Carolina in 1983, people think that, there had been a long period of time that, African Americans were on campus, but that's not true. I mean, the first basketball player at Carolina black basketball player was in 1960 or I want to say 1970. So you're talking about only 13 years. But you think about Michael Jordan and Phil Ford and all those black people who played football and basketball at Carolina, but it hadn't been a long history. So when I get to Carolina, there's no Black Cultural Center, there's no Black Student Union. We're fighting for space just to have a place to have a dance and things like that. So there were still a lot of people who seemed to be uncomfortable with Black people on campus at Carolina in any large numbers. I think probably the year I came in was the largest group of Black students that started at the time. So, but high school was very interesting because, again, I had come from this place that wasn't just black and white. And then you come into Harnett Central and it's only black and white. And there were kids who wore Confederate flag hats and had Confederate flags flying on their cars. And then you could still drive into town, in the towns like Dunn and Coates and all those places that had signs that said the Ku Klux Klan welcomes you to, this is in my lifetime. And I think that's what's interesting at this time. When you talk to a lot of people, black and white, they don't realize that it's not that long ago, especially younger folks. And I think this is a good thing here to talk about it, so people understand that I don't feel like I'm old, but I guess I am. But for people to realize that it's not that long ago, and that we're still having to fight these battles, and we're still having to overcome from things that people don't realize. I am quite aware of your first question about when did you realize that you were a black man. I realize how impactful that moment is when the guy tells me not to put my hands on the cookie jar. That man was alive for a long time after that. His children were alive a long time after that. His grandchildren are still alive today. So he probably imbued some of that hate and animosity to black people to me. So that means that I may go apply for a job and I may be interviewing with their child or grandchild, and they knew him as just Pawpaw. And Pawpaw may not have been a nice man. And Pawpaw may have taught them racism because you teach racism. Yeah.
And you don't know that you don't know, right?
Right.
You're taught, and it's the normal because it's the normal within your household. Whether we're talking about racism, domestic violence, abuse, it could be anything, right?
Right.
You don't know if that's what you grow up in, then that's what you grow up in until you get to a certain age to learn things for yourself and then make those decisions to kind of change for yourself. And usually, there's the joke of you don't ever say mama was wrong, or
Exactly.
grandpa was wrong. No,
Right.
they're not wrong. When in all ethnicities, they could be wrong, right, on certain things. I think that brings up a good point. You told me a story about remembering a riot in your front yard during elementary school.
Yeah. So in Prince George's County, the area that we moved to when we moved out of the city is called Mitchellville. Some people call it South Bowie or whatever. It's right near, it's not too far from Bowie State University. But at the time, a lot of people don't know this, but Prince George's County was very segregated. You did not go places in Prince George's County in the late 60s and early 70s. It's not like it is now. And so, but we built the first house in an area called Pointer Ridge. We had the first house, and all around us were white people. We were the only black family in the neighborhood. So when I started elementary school, I went to Pointer Ridge Elementary School. I was the lone black student at the school. And then my sisters came, and we were the two. And then another black family came, and then there were three. And that was it for a long time. And I guess this had to be around the third grade. So that would have put us around, 73 maybe. And PG County decided to move some kids from Largo and some of the other places into Pointer Ridge Elementary School. And I remember a delegation of white people coming to the house because they knew my dad. He was the pharmacist, right? He was the responsible black guy, and he was also the first person in the neighborhood. And I remember we were sitting on the steps. The kids were sitting on the steps because they told us not to come downstairs, and they were all in the living room. And I remember this one white lady saying, "Well, you're not like the rest of them niggers." And then immediately my dad said, "Get the F out of my house." And then, so school opens, and I was about to walk to school, and my mom says, "I'm going to drive you," which was real unusual because it wasn't that far. So we get in the car, and I look out the window, and I see white people with signs, white people that I knew. Don't let these niggers in, don't ruin our school, whatever. They were lined up and down the street and screaming at the buses and throwing things, grown adult white people. And so I get into the school, and, it was tense for months. And then Halloween comes around, and a bunch of black kids from, decide they're going to trick or treat in our neighborhood. And they start at our house, but they never got any further. A gang of white people jumped them in our front yard. And it was a melee and cops and all that. So again, in my lifetime, these were people, my neighbors that, I thought were decent people or whatever. They weren't like the people that I knew in the city, like the diplomat kids or whatever, who would talk to anybody. These people, a lot of them were people from Maryland who were Southerners, because Maryland is a Southern state, and they had those Southern sensibilities. And they did not want black people in their neighborhood, even though we were the first family in the neighborhood. It was our neighborhood, still from my standpoint, because we had the first house. But it was just interesting. And then years later, we had moved to North Carolina, but we still owned the house, and we kept it because we traveled back and forth. And I remember I was about to start college, and I had gone to check on the house, and I remember walking out of the house, and the police pulled up, and they wanted to know what I was doing there. I was like, "It's our house," and it was mostly empty most of the time. But I just found it interesting that I got these two bookends of my relationship with that house. Is the first real big experience was this riot, and then one of the last experiences, because we sold the house soon after, was the cops questioning me about being in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And that cop obviously didn't know that was the first house in the neighborhood, and we were the first family in the neighborhood. So just interesting. Wow. Yeah.
I was going to go back to, you said that you were the first house in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like literally the first house in the neighborhood.
Literally. Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. So going there, you talked about going to college at UNC Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
Between after college to now, kind of what have been some of the things that you've been up to? And I know you say you have like a multitude of different professions and been in different places. Yeah. But what kind of walk us along that journey to now?
Okay, well, so it's real complicated because I always thought of myself as a writer and filmmaker. That's what my intent was to be. And of course I wrote and made short films and small films, documentaries mostly. And but I was a father very young, and I think this is a really good thing that a lot of people don't know about me. I had kids when I was in high school, but I was the smart kid, and so was my wife. We had our first kid when we were 16. And we were together, and it surprises a lot of people that we both went to college, but she got sick and she had cancer and she passed away. So I had two little kids. So I had to make a decision. I was writing, for different magazines and newspapers and writing copy for catalog, not making a lot of money, but I got two little kids. So I had to get a real job. And so I was writing copy for catalog at a place called Performance Bicycle. And the owner comes through and he says, "Who knows anything about computers?" And I said, "I do." And he's like, "Come to my office." And next thing you know, I'm in IT. And this is 1986. Mm-hmm. So in 1986, computers were not PCs like we know. It was big mainframe computers. And went over to IBM. We bought a big mainframe. I got a bunch of books and learned how to do that. And so, but I still was writing. I put out a magazine in Chapel Hill. I still was making films, still trying to raise two little kids, and doing everything I could to be what I always wanted to be, which was a filmmaker and a writer. But IT intrigued me too, because again, I'm a tinkerer. And as a kid, my dad and I would go to Radio Shack and buy those little kits, and you'd make stuff. So we'd make a radio, we'd make a computer, we'd make a whatever. And so I had this interest in that. And it turns out I knew how to do it. I could do it well. And then, so eventually most people know me as an IT person and don't even know I write at all. And the people that know I write and make film don't even know I do IT. Wow. And so over the course of that time, I've been very fortunate because I've never had a job interview after that either. I worked for Performance Bicycle until they sold the company. I got a phone call from a friend that says, we need somebody to train computer stuff at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. I walked out of performance and I walked right into Blue Cross, no interview, started a job there. I worked at Blue Cross and Blue Shield for about 9 years, and I thought it was just time for me to go. And for a lot of reasons, some of it I thought had to do with race, and I was being limited. I was also younger than most people in the position that I was in. And I got a phone call from a friend, and they said, we need somebody who's an expert in this. And I walked right into, at the time, it was Carolina Telephone, which became Centel Cellular, which became Sprint Cellular, and Alltel and a lot of other things. And I worked there for a number of years. And I got tired of that. And somebody called me and said, hey, I have a job opportunity. Will you come work for us? And I said, sure. And it was a company called Ascom. They're based in Switzerland. And I would go back and forth to Sweden and Denmark and work with them. And we put out at the time the first wireless voice over IP phone. And I wrote a lot of the technical manuals for that kind of thing. And then, you know, I did that until I got tired. And then I got a phone call out of the blue. Somebody said, hey, FEMA needs some people. This is right after Katrina. And they were like, it's not a full-time job. You can keep your other job, but we need spokesperson for, you know, FEMA. And I ended up in Mississippi as a FEMA spokesperson. And I worked for FEMA on and off for 10 years as a spokesperson. So if you look at the news conferences and the guy that's standing beside the governor and all that, you know, that was me. I did that job. I would fly into town or arrange the press conference, do it. And the reason why I was able to do that job is I've completely skipped this part. I've been on the radio for 30 years. Right now I'm on Foxy 107, 104 in Raleigh. I've been there for 25 years doing a show called Connections with Val Atkinson. I had a show for a long time at North Carolina Central University. And then I wrote for the Chapel Hill News and the News and Observer for a long time, and wrote for freelance for magazines and all that stuff in between doing everything else. Wow. So when I write and when I'm on the radio, I talk about politics, which is completely divorced from the technical stuff that I do on a daily basis. And currently I am with a company called Worldwide Technology, which is owned by the richest Black man in the world, or at least the richest Black man in the United States, Dave Stewart. And I'm assigned to the United States Postal Service as a senior engineer at the Postal Service. So most of the new technology stuff or whatever comes through me. So we're working on some interesting projects called Post Office of the Future that I'm really excited about, and trying to keep the post office open. And then I work on just really cool projects as part of that team. And I'm the senior wireless engineer, but I also do a lot of consulting on the network side. So I have a busy, exciting life. And as you can see behind me, I do a podcast called The Deal. It comes on every Saturday. We talk to people from all over the world about everything, politics and that kind of thing. I've been doing that for a while as well, and I write every day. So busy.
Wow. Yes. You have been busy. You have been busy. So let me ask you this, because I think it's a very important question and it'll help someone. What did you attribute to those phone calls that you got throughout the years that said, hey, we have a position here. Are you interested in it? Hey, we need this. Are you interested? What attributed to that?
Because I talk to absolutely everybody. I have no compunction about putting myself in a place or near people or in a conversation with people. I don't limit myself. I mean, I think one of the things that I'll run into a lot of junior engineers on some of my technical side, Black engineers, and they will not talk to other people. They'll talk to me. But I tell them, you have to go to where the other folks are, because they'll see that it's okay for me to see you. But if you want to be in this world where you expect to get the salaries that you want and have the positions you want, people have to know that you have those skills. They will not give you the same kind of break they give their nephew or another person that looks like them. So if they've never heard you talk, they don't know how you engineer, they don't know, who you are. Don't expect them to give you a chance just by sending them a resume. My resume is up front. My resume is me and all the work that I've done. People can see, they can read what I've written. They can see the projects that I've worked on, that kind of thing. And unless you put yourself out there, nobody knows you're there. But you also have to make relationships with people. So everybody who's called me is a relationship, right? We maybe never even did anything business-wise together, but it was from a relationship. A chance meeting sometimes. In one case, like the company I worked for in Denmark, I was at a Durham Bulls baseball game, sat next to a woman who just started talking, and then we realized we knew some of the same people. And then she said, well, I'm having a really hard time finding somebody for this position. This is what they need. And then I said, well, let me think about it. Well, she mentioned me to the person that we knew mutually and said, no, that's the guy you need to get. And then the next day I was off to that job. So I literally have not had a job interview except for my very first job in my whole entire life. So when people talk about interviewing and stuff, I don't know about that. I just been fortunate again.
What keeps you going?
What keeps me going? What keeps me going is I think I see a lot of potential for especially Black folks, because my first thought when I wake up in the morning is, what can I do to help some Black folks? And I know that we have the ability to do any and everything. We just haven't gotten the opportunities all the time. And sometimes we don't even know we can do it, And what I try to stress to, again, a lot of the young engineers I run into that are on the way up is like, read a book today or read something today. I literally make a point. I write at least 1,000 words every day. I read at least 1,000 words every day. That's my minimum. And I try to educate myself on something in my field every day. And that's what I try to tell them, because I have hope that I can encourage somebody to pick up that habit, and then they'll be able to be in the same position that I'm in. I've never been without a job. I've never been struggling, despite the fact that, trying to raise kids on my own and stuff. I didn't know that. I was able to make it. And I think a lot of people can do that too. They just don't realize they can. So I try to make myself available to people as well.
How important is mentorship?
Well, it's everything to me, because I've had really good mentors. When I look back on my life, it's incredible the people that I've met. I met Barack Obama before he was Barack Obama. Right? Nobody knew him. We were in this group called Public Allies, and the whole idea behind that group was that you get older people to mentor you and whatever. And so I can count as my mentor Chuck Stone, who was the head of the journalism department at UNC Chapel Hill, and his wife Louise. Well, the reason why I think mentorship is so important is because when I was going to Chuck and Louise's house, I had no idea how important they were, and so one day I'm sitting at Louise's table, and I see this photo album. I open it up, and it's her and Malcolm X just chilling. And I was like, tell me this story. And the night Malcolm's house gets blown up, they end up at Chuck and Louise's house. Wow. And then so Chuck and Louise, they knew Bill and Camille Cosby, and they knew all these other people. So every time I wanted to meet other people or whatever, I had this mentor, this connection to somebody else who had already done the work or whatever, and they give you access to other people. So when young people come to me and they say, I want to do this, that, and the other, I think about people that I know that I could put them in touch with, right? So it's that whole 6 degrees of separation kind of thing too, is that, like I said, I have been able to meet every president except for Donald Trump since Gerald Ford. Wow. So I've literally been in a room and multiple times with a lot of these presidents. And a funny story, I kept running into Bill Clinton at one point. When I worked at FEMA, Bill Clinton and the older George Bush would come to disasters, and I would see them all the time. And so when Hillary was running against Barack, they decided to have a rally in Lillington, of all places. And Bill Clinton came to the rally. I happened to be in Lillington that day, and I'm walking into the courthouse, and Bill Clinton sees me. He was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he comes over and gives me a big hug. And everybody's like, "How do you know Bill Clinton?" Well, I met Bill Clinton through some of the other mentors I have, like Dr. John Hope Franklin, who was one of my mentors. So I would sit at his kitchen table, and one night I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and who calls John Hope Franklin? Bill Clinton. So you never know who you can put somebody in touch with either. And that's how my life has been, is being open and willingness to be open, but also willingness to give that openness to somebody else through you. So people come to me all the time, and I'll introduce them to people if I feel like, they really are sincere about wanting to advance their life and their career and that kind of thing.
That's wonderful. So at the end of the day, what's your mark on the world or your legacy?
I don't think I've gotten to the point where I can do that yet. Like I said, I have a really weird life because I've met all kind of people. And if you would indulge me for like 2 minutes, I gotta tell this. People know about the Duke Lacrosse case, right? Well, what people don't know is that most of it is just baloney. Crystal Mangum, the girl for the Duke Lacrosse case, I know her, and we wrote a book together. And right when it happened, before it blew up in the media, I get a phone call from a friend of mine, and they said, "I need for you to meet somebody." And I was like, "I'm in Chicago," and they're like, "When you get back to Raleigh, come see me." So I'm at the airport, and they scheduled a meeting over in Durham. I still don't know who I'm going to meet. And I walked in the room, and this is really petite woman there, she just looks like a person. And they say, "Well, this is Crystal Mangum." And I go, and then they tell me the whole, story about her dancing at the party and that kind of thing. And I'm like, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And she says, "I don't want people to think that I'm a bad person." And so immediately what I did from there is I took her, I put her away, and then Al Sharpton shows up, and then all that other stuff blows up around it. Stephen Miller, who is now the president's right-hand man, he's the one that pumped up this story as a national story. And all the time I had Crystal on ice. She wasn't saying anything, but everybody else was telling her story. And so I got a recorder, and I just started recording her talking about herself. And the reason why is that my whole life, and I go back to what I told you I wanted to be before, which is a filmmaker and a writer. I wanted to tell stories, genuine stories about people, and tell them right. And so Crystal tells me a completely different story than what everybody thinks. It was happenstance that she ended up there. She didn't know they had money. It was happenstance that, all this stuff around it, but everybody else was telling her story, and we never could get anybody to listen. So we wrote a book, and it's a really good book. It's called The Last Dance for Grace. It's going to be reissued in a couple of weeks. It's 10 years old now. And in it, she tells this story about herself, about her life, the questions that you asked me, not about the Duke Lacrosse case, because that's not important. What's important is a lot of times Black people get caricatured into being something that they're not. What people didn't know about Crystal is she graduated from Central with the highest honors. She had like a 3.9 GPA. She was working on her master's degree in psychology. She was dancing because she had these kids and was trying to make money She was literally the person who says, I'm dancing to get through college. She was that person. She also had bipolar disorder. And so the book ended up being about her struggle with bipolar disorder, the misunderstanding everybody had about her, and this story that people were telling about her that she couldn't tell herself. Yeah. So we had worked out a deal with NBC, with CNN, and we taped these specials about Crystal's life, and that was supposed to coincide with the release of the book. Well, the day comes where we're supposed to do the press conference, we're supposed to be on the Today Show, and it all gets canceled. We did a 90-minute special with Soledad on CNN. Nobody has ever seen it, right? So you asked me about legacy or whatever. One of the things I do want to do is actually tell that story the right way at some point before I die, because I think people have completely misunderstood it. I will get people now who will say, oh, she's the one who got those guys put in prison. They never went to prison. They were never on trial. I'll get, oh, she's the one who killed her boyfriend. It was a domestic dispute. He beat her up. I was on the phone with her that night. I never got called to testify at the trial. And now she's sitting in jail for manslaughter, where she probably should not have even gone, not probably, she shouldn't have gone to trial, right? But that story has not been able to be told because there's these other forces that keep Black people as a caricature. We're in a box. We're not supposed to be anything else. So if she's a dancer, that means she's probably also a prostitute. That means she's probably also crazy. That means because she's taking medication for bipolar disorder. What other people didn't know about her is her children are biracial. So they tried to make it as she hated white men. She was married to a white man. So it was all these things that, when you talk about legacy, I like to tell stories about the truth, because so much of what we know about Black people is not the truth. And that's what I want to do, is tell the truth.
Yeah. So in the essence of telling stories and telling the truth, what's a story that you're like outside of this one with Crystal? And I think it's an amazing story, and glad that you guys are releasing the book, and hope that you can get it to go further so that her story can be told right through her lens. What is something that's been a desire of yours to a project to work on?
Oh, gosh, like I said, I've been so fortunate to meet so many people. I'm almost inclined to think, because I was always looking for real stories. Like one story I was trying to tell at one point was about how difficult it is being an Olympic athlete. So again, I have a weird life. So another part of my life has been, I've coached Olympic level athletes. And because I was a decent athlete, but I wasn't a good one. Not great. I got cousins who went to the Olympics and stuff, but
so you either coach, or you're the athlete, or you coach, right?
Yeah. So I got into coaching, and then I would see these people who worked their asses off or whatever, but everybody else around them made the money, or they got them to take steroids or whatever and ruin their lives and ruin their career. But the Nikes and those agents and all those people kept going on doing what they were doing. And then you became the pariah, and seen as a bad person. But the difficulty that it is of trying to be an Olympic level athlete is incredible. And then I know so many other athletes that are pro athletes in basketball and NFL and NBA, and I know a few guys who play professional baseball, and that immediately after the lights go out, most of them don't end up having really good lives after that. And so I would like to, it's sort of like, I don't know if you remember the basketball movie where they followed the kids through high school or whatever, and some of them make it and some of them don't. I don't know. I've been wanting to tell a story about, what it's really like for the person who, sacrifices all, gives all, or whatever, and it doesn't end up as a rosy picture. We only talk about it. And I think it would give, especially Black boys in particular a more realistic view of what sports is supposed to be. I like sports. I played sports. I think, a good athlete. But at some point, I was like, I don't know about this. These white guys are making all this money as the coaches and stuff, and I'm running and killing myself for them. I'm not going to be rich off of this. And so many young black boys chase that football and basketball thing, and nothing ever comes out of it for them. And then they don't even get an education in a lot of cases. And that bothers me. So I'd like to do a project around that, trying to be realistic about sports. And then, especially in this time of COVID, when we have this odd sports, sports without fans and all this other stuff, I want people to look at it really closely, that there's only a few people who play professional sports. I do admire somebody who works hard enough to make it there, but I know so many people who didn't. And then even the ones who did, a lot of them don't make it very far after they finish. And I would like to do something around that.
Wow. I want to go back just a little bit. I think that would be a great project, especially looking at sports now, as you said, in the pandemic. It's just crazy, and it is exposing a lot, right? Especially with the athletes during this time. But I want to go back a little bit. You talked about your father being a pharmacist and being the first in the neighborhood. And then when others started trying to come and they were going to bust them into your schools, where you, your sister, maybe one or two other families were like the only ones for a long time, that they came to your father, trusting him as the educated Black who kind of almost speak for the whole Black community in a lot of ways. Have you had in your lifetime, have you had to kind of bear that brunt, I'll say, so to speak, in carrying the Black community in different places that you walked into because there weren't others like you there?
Yeah, you know what? That's interesting, because especially in the IT world, and since I started when IT really was getting started in '86, most of the time I'm the only Black person in the room. And I would show up at places and I'd be the consultant that showed up, and they'd be like, well, who is this dude? And just recently, in the last year, I was in a meeting, and I was just quiet, and people were talking around me, and they were talking to one of my colleagues who was the junior engineer. I'm the lead engineer, and I let them talk. They directed all their comments at him. So finally, my colleague said, "Hey, you need to talk to him. He's going to be the one that's going to tell you what's going to happen. I can't." And then they all looked, and you could see the blood drain out of their face when they realized that they were talking around me and through me and all this kind of stuff. And then when that happens, you always have to weigh, is it worth trying to school them, or do you just go ahead and, about your business? I decided to take a dual tack. I was going to school them and be nice to them at the same time. I was going to make them even more uncomfortable. So I went to the board and I started putting some math equations on the board, because what a lot of people don't know about IT, especially on the wireless side, is that you got to do a lot of math. And so they were trying to tell me they were trying to do something. I said, well, can somebody explain this equation to me? That made it clear that you do not ever come at me that way again. But by the time we left, I can tell that I had broken their spirit, not in a malicious way, but it humbled them, and they understood that, don't make any assumptions about who you're in a room with. I've had that happen way too many times in my career in IT. I've had people tell me, I've never worked with a Black engineer before. I didn't trust what you told me initially. It was a guy out in Colorado. He was like, I literally have never been in a room with a Black person before, working with them. He said, I go to the Denver Nuggets games all the time and I go to the Broncos games all the time. And he said, that's the only thing I know about Black people. He said, because he kept going back, changing what I had said they should do, until he realized he was making a big mistake, and he apologized. So I've encountered it more often than I've wanted to. I take it in stride. I attempt to take it and use it to educate them. And like I said, that last one that happened last year where I put the equation on the board and I knew they couldn't answer it. That was what that was my comeuppance for them. And hopefully they learned something from that.
So how do you move through, I'm sure you've had other injustices or obstacles happen throughout your life.
Yeah.
What's your philosophy around that and how do you move past it?
I think I try to be practical in the cases, like I said, where I can directly, confront it. I will. I'm not shy about telling people how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, but you also have to be cognizant of where you are. This is another real life thing. I was in between doing some things. Somebody asked me to do some work for them, and it was putting this big router in. It's really complicated, and out in a rural area. And so it was to provide internet down in, I don't know, Duplin County or somewhere. So I go down there and I'm putting in this router. And I'm having to make sure all my, fiber is in the right place. I'm trying to make sure that it's configured correctly. And the cops pull up on me. And the guy has his hand on his gun. He says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm installing this router." and he goes, "Well, we got to report somebody was stealing copper." I said, "There's no copper in here. This is all fiber." Mm-hmm. And so I said, I had to make a choice right then. Do I... Now I'm driving at that point a CenturyLink vehicle. Mm-hmm. It has cones out there that say CenturyLink and all of that. There's no ambiguity about I have the belt on with my pliers and all that stuff. And I have my laptop out and I'm, and I said, well, I can confront him or maybe end up shot and dead, or I could, try to talk my way through this. Eventually I said, well, come over here, look in the thing, and you tell me if you see any copper in here. And then, but it kind of de-escalated from there. Some other cops come. One cop says, "Oh, he's new. Please forgive him." But I was pissed off. Yeah. So I immediately called the sheriff of Duplin County and I said, "I need to come see you." And I went to the sheriff's department. I said, look at, it says CenturyLink right there. Mm-hmm. I have all my tools. And this guy had his hand on his gun, supposedly for somebody stealing copper, and there's no copper in here. And I'm pissed off. And then immediately, because I know people, I call Reverend Barber from the NAACP. And I tell him the story. He was like, "Well, if anything happens, remember we got your back." Then I call my attorney friend and says, "Hey, we may need to do something." Because I have all those tentacles out there, I'm able to, call these other people for backup. But, like I said, you have to make a choice in the moment. How do you confront it? There, I de-escalated, but then I escalated it on the backside by calling all these other people, by calling the sheriff, by telling him how I knew that he needed to account for the behavior of that particular officer, and that I wanted him to have some training, and I wanted proof that he got the training, and they provided it because they knew that I had called Reverend Barber. So everybody can't do that, but I'm just saying, be mindful of the situation that you're in and how to handle it.
Yeah. What do you say? What do you want people to say when you walk in a room?
When I walk in a room, that's Ed Clark. I know full well that I'm a Black person. When I wake up in the morning, I am a Black man from the time I came out of my mom's womb until they put me in the ground, right? I know that. However, I also know that Blackness, the way we have come to know Blackness, a lot of it is based on 1619 and before, these people trying to make an excuse to make us slaves and to make us subservient and to make us less than human or whatever. So I need to detach myself from that part of it, right? That there's something inherently wrong with Blackness. And it's not. I have no problem identifying myself as a Black man, Ed Clark. What I do have a problem with is assigning attributes to Blackness that aren't true. Like I said, my father had a degree in organic chemistry and a PhD. He not only was he a pharmacist, but he was also a PhD. And then I know for sure that he's a smart dude, right? When I had chemistry homework, he'd be like, "Oh yeah," you know. And I know tons of Black men and women like that, right? So I don't want anybody to lead with the Black man, Ed Clark, based on your definition of Black man. I'm the Black man, Ed Clark, who is a human being first, who's very capable of doing any and everything, who knows more than you probably, right? Especially in those situations where I go into where people are questioning the advice that I give them, not knowing I'm the senior engineer. And so I want them to know that they need to treat me at the same level until you know otherwise. And I wish that every Black person had afforded that same opportunity. And that's what I work towards every day.
Yeah. What about when you leave the room? What do you want them to say?
That's Ed Clark. And he answered my question. He fulfilled all the expectations I would have of any other person. I want to know him because seems to be interesting. I tell stories all the time. So he's a friend. He's somebody who's approachable. It's funny. I have people who have a completely different impression of me. A lot of people in this field think I'm not approachable and mean because I challenge them, especially young Black engineers that I run into, because I don't just automatically give them the bit. I challenge them a lot. So I used to do these training classes on Thursdays. Anybody could come or whatever. And every class started with a problem on the board. And so about a couple months into it, when the engineer just came to me and was like, "Why are you so mean?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And they were like, "Well, you talk to us as if we don't know anything." I said, "You don't. You guys never answer my first question that's on the board." I said, "That's what happens when you go in and you want to get a contract for $1 million or $50 million is somebody wants to make sure you know what the hell you're talking about." I said, "I'm trying to prepare you guys when I'm not around. I'm not going to be able to shield you. I want to challenge you to do really hard, incredible jobs and do really significant work in your life, but you can't do it without being challenged. So I'm not gonna baby you." So once they realized what I was trying to do, then I got a whole different, impression from them. Then white engineers started coming to it, and then the same thing. I want the best for them too. If you're a human being and you have an interest in what I'm talking about, I want you to get something out of what I told you. I don't want to waste your time, and I certainly don't want you to waste my time, because I already told you I'm real busy. I do a lot of stuff, and I'm constantly shifting gears from one thing to another. So by the time we get off of this, I'll probably be writing. And then sometime today, I'll probably be reading. And then I signed up for a class this afternoon that I'm going to take, that's in my field. But I'm taking a class later on tonight that's not in any of the stuff that I do. It is just something I'm interested in. And that's what I try to encourage especially Black men to do. Don't put yourself in a box. I played rugby. Now, how many brothers play rugby? And the reason why I started playing is I was in my early 20s. I was looking for something else to do. Everybody was playing, club football or, whatever, or playing in the softball league. But I saw that sport and I said, I bet you I could play that. I ended up playing until I was in my early 40s. And I ended up making lifelong friends out of it. People from South Africa and Ireland and Fiji and everywhere else, and it's because if you put yourself out there, you'll get something back. And that's what I encourage people to do, is put yourself out there. I want Black men to know that, you're not limited to anything. You can do absolutely whatever you want.
Yeah. This has been great. And your rugby, you talking about rugby brings me to something that we do with every episode of the Voices of a Black Man, and that's quick, rapid fire questions.
Okay.
But I have to ask before I go there, how in the world did you find rugby? Where were you to be able to find rugby and then to be able to play? Because I think that's absolutely cool.
So I was still stupid enough to think that I was gonna maybe, you know, be a decent triple jumper, you know. So I was still working out, and I looked over my shoulder and I saw these people kicking the ball around, and I went and I stood at the fence and I said, I could do that. So I went to the library and read the rules, and then the next day they were out there practicing. I had already bought a ball, and I was like, can I run with you guys? And then I guess I was 22 maybe, and then I played until I was 44.
Wow. You brought up some interesting things, but I see a theme that keeps happening is I read about it or I researched it.
Yep.
And then I went after it. So I was interested, so I went to learn more, and then I went after it. Mm-hmm. Interested, even with the computers, right? You knew enough, but then you said I went and read the manuals, and then I went after it, type thing, which is interesting. I think that speaks volumes for how you allow additional opportunities to come into your life, just by number one saying, okay, if I'm interested in it, no matter who's there, let me just go figure out some more about it. Okay, I want to do it. Let's go do it.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. Okay, quick fire. You ready?
Yep.
They're not too hard, I promise.
All right.
Favorite food?
Favorite food, Indian.
Indian. Is there a favorite dish?
I would say very, 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 very hot vindaloo.
Vindaloo. I just had Indian the other day and it was quite delicious. I love Indian as well. Let's see. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? I have two that I always talk to people about. A Face in the Crowd with Andy Griffith. And the reason why is Andy playing a role that nobody thinks he should be playing because everybody thinks him as affable and nice. But I recommend that movie to anybody. It's an Ilya Kazan movie, and it's about a character that's a lot like Donald Trump. So it's called A Face in the Crowd. That's one. And I think my other one is a Raisin in the Sun. I think there's like a ton of Black movies that I can put in that same box, but that one I think for a lot of different reasons. I'm a movie person too because I shoot film. You can't see it now, but my camera's right behind me, and I'm constantly shooting stuff too. I like to look at movies. I look at a lot of old movies, and I try to find any kind of movie too. I will watch absolutely anything once.
And I'm sure you're looking at it with a different eye.
Yeah.
You're looking at it with a movie making eye.
Right. Yeah.
Favorite song?
Favorite song? Oh, wow. That's hard because I like all kind of music, but I like Redemption Song, Bob Marley. I think it's my favorite song.
Okay. Favorite vacation or destination spot?
The very best place I've ever been, and it was so tranquil, and it's Anguilla. It's a really small island. It's only like 2 miles wide and 13 miles long. They don't allow cruise ships or whatever. And the last time I was there, Denzel and his wife were in the villa next to me, and Brad Pitt was in the one behind the way. But it was absolutely stunning. The water's beautiful.
Favorite ice cream?
Favorite ice cream? Vanilla. Because I can mix anything with it.
You can make it into anything you want. Gotcha. Yeah. Last question. Favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby, cooking. So if you follow me on Facebook, I post a lot of food pictures, but it's stuff that I cook. And I'm on this thing since the COVID pandemic thing is every meal that I'm cooking has to be under $10, but it has to be from somewhere else. Right. So last week was Chinese week. Then I had Africa week. And then, so I've been doing different weeks, and I've been trying to cook a a meal that I can eat for dinner and then have something left over for lunch for under $10.
Yeah. Wow. So what's your absolute favorite thing to cook anytime?
Anytime? Oh, wow. That's hard because I cook absolutely everything. But I think just doing a stir fry of, stuff, especially if I've grown it. I used to have a garden. I don't have it anymore. That's killing me now. So I'm looking for a house where I can put a garden in. But I love fresh vegetables. And a lot of times I'll just eat, vegetables and cornbread. And that's a meal for me. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds good already. Like you're making me hungry. So that is the end of our quick fire. So thank you so much. You survived.
Yeah.
You survived. I want to tell you thank you so much for coming on today, for telling us your story through your lens. And I want to give you the platform now to talk about anything that's on your heart, whether it's to a person, a community, to the world. It's all up to you, of what you want to be seen and heard for right now.
Yeah, you know what? I am so thankful that you're doing this. I thought about it really hard last night. I I want to tell Black folks that we have the opportunity to be absolutely. I just reiterate what I said before. You can be absolutely whatever you want to be. Nobody can assign anything to you or whatever. This skin color that we have. I don't understand it. You don't either. Nobody does. Nobody understands, whatever the creator did whenever they made different types of people, right? But the fact is that there are. But whatever your desire is, go after it. But make sure that you're not doing anything to hurt other people. I am very adamant about, and I say it all the time to people when I end conversations with them, go do something good for somebody. I literally say that, dozens of times a day when I interact with people. And I guess that's what I want to leave people with is go do something good for somebody today. Don't think about yourself all the time. We are a selfish species anyway, right? Human beings are selfish, but be unselfish for a while. And I think that's why we're in the position that we're in, that we have a selfish nature. You can't cure COVID-19 if you're selfish. And if people are trying to make money off of curing COVID-19, which is what it seems like to me, you can't be selfish and still want to have Confederate statues up, knowing full well that you're hurting other people in the community. So my white friends, no, this is not about heritage. It is about hate. You have got to do stuff in the furtherance of good. And that's what I hope people understand about me, is that I try to do that every day.
Thank you so much, Ed Clark. His story through his lens. It has been a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much. Do good for somebody. Do good for somebody else other than yourselves. Viewers, thank you so much. This has been The Voices of a Black Man with C.K. James. Today we had the pleasure to talk to Mr. Ed Clark. And as we talk to Mr. Ed Clark, let me just tell you, his story is amazing. And not only is it amazing, he brought out some things that maybe you have never heard before, positions that you've never thought about before. Now you've listened. The next part is up to you. Is to check yourself for any biases that you may be known or unknown. Something may have come up in this conversation today that make you want to delve a little bit further, to explore it a little bit more, to find out what is this feeling, or what was that thought that I've never had before. Ed Clark said it plainly: do good for someone else. It starts with you, it starts with me, the person in the mirror first. If we can help change that person, then we can help change our family, our community, and then the world. Again, this has been Voices of a Black Man. I'm C.K. James. Follow us. Find out more at www.voicesofablackman.com. Take care. Bye.